Riskiness, where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios here in Las Vegas. And folks, we've been talking about coronavirus and how it is affecting crowdfunding. We're not going to stop. We're going to continue that conversation. Before we get into that, let's introduce Vicki Hutch-Maloff over at the QOZmarketplace.com. Vicki, how you doing today?
I'm excellent. Another absolutely beautiful day in Vegas, although it's kind of weird because the strip is empty. So a little bit of eerie kind of tumbleweed blowing down the strip, but it's okay. We have an outstanding guest, one of our favorite guests on the podcast. So let's get going.
Yes, a multiple-time appearer on our podcast. Let's introduce once again Mark Roderick. He's a partner over at Lex Nova Law. Mark, how you doing over there today?
Very well, thank you. We're having a pretty nice day here too. I'm on the other coast.
Yes, you are.
So,
you're on the rainy coast.
It's a nice day. It's a nice day. It is kind of eerie. We were just talking about anywhere you go is empty. The roads are empty, which is nice if you do need to go anywhere. But all the mall parking lots are empty. It's a very strange situation we have now.
Have you been to the beach, Mark?
We have, yes. We live about an hour from the New Jersey. And they're just this past weekend, and we had driven down a couple weekends before. It's not warm enough to go in the water yet, and you have to find a beach that's open because some of the townships have closed their beaches because of COVID. But the weather is such that there's no one there anyway. So, there's like on the whole beach, as far as you could see, there were probably fewer than a dozen people. But It's nice. I have to say, we also went out. We have the Great Pine Barrens around here in southern New Jersey. It's just big sort of wilderness forest. And both the beach and the Pine Barrens, for some reason, during the pandemic, seemed very peaceful to me, getting out into nature. I mean, there's no one there, but somehow there's not supposed to be anyone there. So it feels normal.
Yeah, that's kind of the concept. Well, I saw this news blurb on TV this morning where there's a bar, and I don't even know where this bar is, someplace over on the East Coast, and they decided they wanted to open their bars. So they made these funny little things that look like those walkers that babies use, only it's a big inner tube around it, and you get inside it, and you look like a little toddler learning how to walk, and that's supposed to keep you social distanced and be able to get a beer and drink it with your friends until, you've had 2 or 3, and then you don't know how to get down, and you tumble down in, to the road.
Well, see, I love that kind of story because, as you know, I'm a big believer in American capitalism. That's why I like crowdfunding so much. I really believe in the American entrepreneurial spirit. And so I love stories like that because they are, they're funny, but beyond that, they are showing how creative people can be rather than sitting around and complaining. That bar, what a great idea. You can actually make some money.
Exactly. And I keep saying this, that an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. It's in their blood. So they may have a company and it's not doing well and the virus has had a huge impact on it. They're not going to roll up and crawl into a hole. They're either going to recreate their business that they had, or they're going to completely create a whole new one because they can't help themselves. But it's like capitalism in the blood, and they're just going to step over it, do it better, be creative, and we'll all be better in the end because of it.
That's what I think. I saw a similar one, a little more risque, but there one of the many types of businesses that's been shut down are strip clubs. Ron probably knows all about that, but I saw that a strip club had converted to a sort of kind of fast food restaurant where they
drive up strip club.
Drive up, and the girls would come out, scantily clad, and it was packed. And I mean, I'm just thinking this is a win-win. There they are.
There were so many people
making money.
Yeah, there were so many people at that place. From what I heard.
Right. From what you heard.
Not that you experienced it yourself.
No, but I just think that's such I mean, those are great examples of how entrepreneurs can overcome and are overcoming these restrictions. So it kind of warms my heart.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
And once the fear mongering and once that whole concept of everybody's going to die kind of passed over and realized no, everybody is not going to die, then the creative juices kicked in, and now I believe that we will recreate our society not just entrepreneurially, but as a person, as society, we will make ourselves better because of it. Just like we don't need to have 3 Starbucks a day, maybe we can make our own.
Maybe so. Yeah, it is going to change, and of course, the stuff that you folks and I are involved in the business world are going to change somewhat. I don't know. It's easy to predict that commercial office space is going to become, less necessary. But and I don't know how that's going to play out. But like conventions, right? You and I, we go to conventions sometimes. We speak at conventions. We listen, and you got to be thinking about the convention industry.
Especially here in Vegas.
Right, especially there in Vegas. And people are starting to do some really cool online conventions, with big numbers of people. And I just wonder, someone's going to get that right and get the right mix.
Well, and Ron and I were talking about this the other day, and it's you can do virtual speakers and they can talk to a bunch of people and whatever their topic is in that, but there's something about going to a conference and meeting people and looking people in the eye and talking to people and doing trade shows that are person to person. And I don't know that it's possible to get that same feeling virtually, because there's a lot of I don't know exactly what the word is, subliminal messaging going on when you're face-to-face looking somebody in the eye than when you're looking at them through a distorted picture on a computer.
No doubt. And I think, entrepreneurs will figure out a way to address that. I don't think the in-person conferences are going away, but I bet there will be fewer of them, or I'm not the guy who's going to figure that out, but there is some mix. Conferences provide a lot of benefits. It's all, the networking that happens at conferences is often just as important or more important than what the speakers are saying.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out how to allow for networking. Frankly, I mean, a lot of people like going to conferences in Las Vegas because, it's Las Vegas.
Well, because they could go to drive-up strip clubs.
They can go to drive-up or even walk-in strip clubs. So you're not going to – I mean, people – I personally don't particularly enjoy business travel, but, some people do. Some people like getting out of the house, going somewhere. So it's impossible to predict exactly where it ends up, but I do think you're going to see some adjustment. I will tell you, even my church, like all churches, we've been having Zoom meetings on Sunday morning, Zoom worship services, and then you realize, so wait a second, if the church is just if a church is online, then we can have members of our church who live anywhere in the world. I mean, that's a weird.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? You
weird.
always think of churches as people who live within 5 miles and drive there Sunday morning. But once the geography becomes immaterial, what is that going to mean for churches?
That's true.
It's just once you start thinking in those ways, you can imagine a significantly different world. We'll see.
Yes, and I think this is the gateway to a change in the world across the entire world, and it's the opportunity. I tell everybody, I tell all my friends, this is God's way of slapping people in the face and saying, look what's really important, and get rid of all the stuff that's just baggage, and be kinder to your people around you, be kinder to your neighbor, be kinder to yourself, because that's what's important.
Yeah, you're right, Becky. And look at the earth. Be kinder to the earth. Look at
there you go.
Look at the air in Los Angeles these days.
You can actually see the sky.
You can actually
see Los Angeles, right? Exactly.
What about that? That seemed impossible before.
Hey, Mark, it's funny. You've been on this podcast a number of times, and one of the reasons why I love having you on is that when we do our show notes, it's easy to just copy and paste because we have your bio and you have your picture over the time. But apparently, I had to change the bio aspect of it because you just recently started a new law firm, didn't you?
That is correct, yes. Effective January 1st, I and a group of other folks, some from my existing law firm and some from other law firms, joined together and created this new law firm, Lex Nova Law, LLC. And it is kind of funny. I can say kind of ironically, we picked the perfect time to start a new business right before the worst pandemic in history. Great timing. But it's a funny thing to think about, but it's actually turned out well for us, relatively speaking, because, when you're in an older organization, the older organizations have legacy habits and legacy technology. And legacy, meaning as euphemism for old and outdated.
Exactly. Yeah, they did it like this last year, so we're going to do it like this year.
Right, and that stretches into 10 years and 15 years and 25 years. And so when you start a new organization, you don't have any choice but to use new stuff, because you're starting something new, so you're going to use new stuff. And so starting this firm on January 1 of this year, we adopted all the new technology, didn't require us to throw anything away because we were starting fresh. And the new technology, everything being cloud-based and digital, wow, that actually turned out to be just the right move to deal with a pandemic. So, for us, I almost feel guilty because there are, as there are so many people truly suffering through this pandemic, not only getting sick and dying, but, how many tens of thousands of people in Las Vegas alone are suddenly unemployed. And there is real, we in this state, I think the wealthiest state in the country, we have food lines, miles and miles, food lines in the United States. So I feel almost embarrassed saying that for us in our law firm, and for many white collar workers, it hasn't been that big of a deal in terms of working. You flip on the switch to your computer at home, where I'm standing right now, and it's really no different than being in the office. So forming the law firm, the new law firm, and getting all the new technology systems launched turned out to be actually sort of the perfect recipe for a pandemic after all, even though the timing is kind of funny.
Well, and not only that, but you can expand your book of clients so that they don't have to be right there where you're located. They now can be all around the world. And in business law, that's perfect for you.
And that has been my practice for about the last 7 or 8 years as I've focused on crowdfunding. There's something about that industry, I guess because it's Internet-based anyway. People, my clientele is all over the world.
Right.
It's actually very little of it within, say, 50 miles of my office. It's, I have a big percentage of my, clientele, I don't know, 20, 30% is on the West Coast, California and Texas and Chicago and all over the place. And the pandemic will, just further push us in that direction, just like the church. Once geography doesn't matter, wow, that opens up a lot of doors.
There you go. That's right. And crowdfunding too. So tell us what your specialty is, Mark.
Well, generically, I help businesses raise capital online, because that's what crowdfunding is, not Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the real capital raising, selling stocks, selling bonds. So I help companies raise capital online, and I also help online platforms that are in that business. So the platforms sort of are where companies go to list their shares and investors go to invest. So that whole ecosystem, consultants and portals and issuers, and that's what I do. It's all around crowdfunding, which is just online capital formation.
So is that just you specifically, Mark, or is that what all the other members in your firm, are they all specializing in crowdfunding and investing and business?
They're all business lawyers, but no, they're not. They're not all crowdfunding lawyers. Several of them, fortunately, I have a team because I couldn't do it all myself. Fortunately, I do have lots of great help. But the firm is, it's a kind of boutique business firm. We do a lot of tax stuff. I have a couple partners who do very esoteric tax and asset protection planning, including offshore stuff. But, a boutique business law firm, I would say.
Well, and I would think the best part is you don't have to deal with litigation in court.
I don't. I stay far away from litigation as humanly possible.
The least exciting area of practice in a law firm from my point of view.
Yeah, well, the most expensive, the least rewarding. So generally,
ways to look at that.
Generally, the job of a corporate lawyer is to keep his or her clients out of court. That's usually the best option.
Right. Yeah, and Mark, I would imagine at this point you guys are really got a good handle on the impact of coronavirus on crowdfunding in general. Obviously, it's had a big time impact on the economy, on real estate, the markets, et cetera. What do you see on the crowdfunding end of this specifically? What are the things that we have to know as far as coronavirus and disclosures along those lines?
Well, on the industry itself, like much of the economy, around about the middle of March when we all went home, everything froze. The economy just froze. People stopped making investments. And so for about, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks, there was a freeze. The real estate crowdfunding market, which had just been going gangbusters, just basically shut down for that period of time. Now, it is definitely opening back up, the number of telephone calls and emails I'm getting from all over the world has spiked up. I mean, like very significantly. The platforms have opened back up. Capital is starting to flow again. You know, the issue with crowdfunding and why it has been affected is true for a lot of other industries. So it's all about pricing. You know, you can't make an investment decision if you don't know what prices are going to be. If you don't know what the real estate's going to be worth, 3 years ago, or you don't know if it's going to be up or down, you don't invest. So I think people are anticipating a significant repricing of assets throughout the economy. And so that's why I think there was a sudden freeze. But people seem to be regaining confidence, probably believing that maybe the repricing won't be as significant as we thought 2 months ago. And the juice is starting to flow again. So, I mean, that's what's happening to the industry general through the pandemic. But many people are believing, and fortunately one of those people is the SEC, is that crowdfunding can itself be a significant vehicle for restarting the economy. That, the economy, although it's dominated in dollar size by big companies, and in particular these days by the 5 big tech companies, that the 5 big tech companies comprise now more than 20% of the S&P 500, which is phenomenal. Nevertheless, that's not where the jobs get created. The jobs still get created by small companies. And now that 33 million Americans are newly unemployed, I think there's some hope that entrepreneurs will be the ones to provide those jobs, as they always have, and that crowdfunding, community-based, one step at a time businesses, will provide that boost. So the SEC just a few weeks ago issued what you can only really call emergency crowdfunding rules, temporary rules that are designed to relax some of the requirements that otherwise apply to Title III crowdfunding, and just make it a little easier for entrepreneurs, to raise capital during this very difficult period. So that was terrific. And the SEC has recently done some other stuff to reinvigorate the Title III crowdfunding market. So, that's music to my ears. I think they're on exactly the right path, and I commend the SEC, as I often do. I think they're giving exactly the right message to entrepreneurs. Now, you asked about disclosure. So that anytime you're crowdfunding to raise capital or raising capital using FedEx or the post office, sending legal documents back and forth, one critical rule is you have to tell investors not only the good things about the potential investment, this might become the next Instagram, but you're required to tell investors about the dark side as well, about negatives, about risks. Required to tell investors about the risks of the investment. And if you don't, you can get in serious trouble. So the example in my recent blog post is that if you were selling stock like on January 15th of this year, and your main supplier was in Wuhan, China, and you decided you'd rather not, you were trying to sell some stock, raise some capital for your company, and you thought maybe you'd just conveniently leave out news about this coronavirus and your investors lose money, they're going to sue you, and they're going to win not only against your company, they're going to sue you personally. So
right.
you're required to disclose risks, and certainly the coronavirus presents a lot of risks to a lot of companies. So you have to, in some detail, talk about the risk that the virus represents, and if you want to, also talk about the opportunities that it presents. You know, if you're Zoom, let's say Zoom was raising capital in January, you know, it could have legitimately said, not only do we think there's no risk for our business, we think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So you don't have to be doom and gloom. You just have to think carefully through what the likely effect of the pandemic is going to be to your particular business, to the extent that you know it.
Well, that's, yeah, exactly. You know, how many times do you see documentation that omit these serious disclosures? Or do you have to, when you go through some of these files and documents, do you like red flag them and say, no, we got to have this in there?
Well, this is what happens. You know, most offering documents are cut and pasted from other offering documents.
Right.
So in the world of offering documents, what you tend to end up with is long, very long list of risk factors, so long that they put you to sleep. You know, they're too long to even read and comprehend. And at the same time, they actually don't talk about the real risks of this particular deal because no one's thought that through. They're just copying and pasting. So risk factors in the legal world are like barnacles on a boat, right? They just get more and more and more. But you're not actually thinking through, you know, what are the risks of this deal, because that's hard and it's time consuming, and you know, people just don't want to spend the time doing it.
Yeah,
well, and
exactly.
Nobody wants to read it either.
No one wants to read it either. Yes, and that's kind of a conundrum. You know, I was actually just talking with a fellow securities lawyer today about it. We securities lawyers who, you know, think it's important, we spend all this time thinking through the risks, and then at the same time, we know that investors don't read those risks. So, like, what are we what is the point of the whole exercise?
Yeah, and it's all about liability. So if you don't put it in there, then you're liable, even if your client or whomever is looking at it doesn't read it. It's irrelevant because the one person out there who looks for it and can't find it is the one person that will take you to the cleaners.
Well, actually what happens is nobody looks for it until they've lost their money.
Well, exactly.
And then they give it to their brother-in-law, who's a plaintiff's lawyer, and
exactly.
The brother-in-law reads through it and saying, okay, what did they miss?
Yeah, and then he puts an ad on TV and says, if this happened to you, call me. Here's my 800 number.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, which is, I mean, that's not how the securities laws are supposed to work.
No.
And I would love to figure out a way to make that process better so that we're really educating the investor about the deal, both the good parts and the bad parts. The investor, the information is presented to the investor in a readable and entertaining way. The investor can make an informed decision. That would be optimal, but in most of the cases, that's just not how it works these days.
No,
and
like
I think to get around that, though, Mark, you're going to have to change the language that lawyers speak, because, you know, if somebody can say something in 5 words, a lawyer will say it in 15.
Not 15, Vicki. You know that.
Well, maybe 25 or 40.
Yeah, 15 binary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
That
but,
is part of the issue, yeah.
Yeah, but getting back to what you said previously, Mark, as far as the SEC is concerned, they're doing a lot better job than they did, let's say, years ago when they made everything so conflicting and hard to understand. Now they're coming out with some interesting information that seems like it's written by people who actually understand the crowdfunding aspect and the ability to create jobs from that perspective. Before it's like that old graphic where you see no right turn and you see the green light signaling a right turn. It's like, what am I supposed to do? But like you said, they're getting a lot better at that, don't you think?
My experience with the SEC, the SEC has a role, and the people who work at the SEC have a job to do, which is in some respects conflicts with my job, which is to help my clients raise money. So I certainly have had my moments of frustration with the SEC and do, on a regular basis. But the big picture is that in my experience, the SEC wants to facilitate capital formation. In other words, it wants the same thing we want. Now, its goals are a little different in detail, but the SEC, in my experience, the SEC tries to make deals work. And when you hear otherwise, for example, you hear from people in the crypto industry, the SEC is stifling innovation. That is BS.
Right.
The SEC is not stifling innovation. The SEC is trying to facilitate capital formation in the context of a squeaky clean U.S. capital market, and that's what its job is, And I mean, that's not true of many bureaucracies. I have dealt with some state regulators who you just don't get the feeling that they're there to facilitate capital formation. It's more like to stop capital formation. But the SEC is, I've always found on the whole the SEC to be constructive, and they are absolutely laser focused on crowdfunding, which again is near and dear to my heart. So when you think about it, SEC is working at home just like everyone else during this pandemic. They have a zillion things to be focused on, big company filings and mergers and acquisitions and all kinds of things going on. Somebody took the time to think through and explain emergency rules for Title III crowdfunding, which in the scheme of our capital markets, it's less than a half a drop in the bucket. But somebody did it, and that means that somebody believes that crowdfunding is important and can help facilitate the rebirth of our economy. And I just think that's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do I. That's a great point. Excellent point. And Mark, before we close this out, for a while there, we met you at a number of Opportunity Zone conferences. You see anything going on with Opportunity Zones and coronavirus?
I haven't seen really anything plus or minus. I know that some people have suggested, which sounds right to me, that to the extent, people were cashing out of the stock market in March as it crashed, there may be an awful lot of capital gain, sitting there.
Right.
Yes.
And, that's got to be reinvested in 6 months. So Opportunity Zones may suddenly see a flood of investment, around September. That kind of
I
sounds
agree with you.
Reasonable to me.
And plus, there's more people have become aware of them. There's actual projects that are going on, and more people have become educated about what they are and how they work. So, and now they have some money. So it just kind of points the way to more Opportunity Zones, more projects, and more funds.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anytime an event happens where people are redeploying capital, taking it out of the stock market, they're putting it somewhere, right?
Well, exactly. And as we said, that when entrepreneurs are recreating themselves, it's not just the real estate aspect of opportunity zones that was the prime focus initially. Now it's shifting to business creation and new business, and how can I make this work, and what do I have to do, and maybe I have to move. And so now we're shifting into the business formation, the business success, and the jobs, which was actually the crux of the program.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. So I see good things ahead. I am sure that the American economy is going to rejuvenate itself, because it always does. And I already see it happening before my eyes. I also think, the socially conscious part of me, clearly, we have got to do something in the society about the disparities, because people are, the pandemic is hurting everyone, but it's not hurting me very much. I hope it's not hurting you. It's hurting poor people. It's hurting the disadvantaged immensely. And, people are getting laid off, and because most Americans get their health coverage through their employers, you get laid off, you don't even have health insurance anymore. And the disparities that this is kind of pulling back the veil and seeing these terrible fractures in our society between a relatively small affluent group and the mass of people who, don't have the money to cover an unanticipated $400 medical cost. That is something I think we have to fix.
And a lot of folks that have been laid off or furloughed or whatever, they don't have either the skill set or the opportunity to learn a new skill set. So if their job doesn't exist anymore, they're really in a conundrum, because they don't even have the opportunity to find a new and different job. Yeah,
it's a bad thing. Whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, this is something that we have to fix. And I have great faith in American entrepreneurs, and I'm sure they will help fix it. I think these issues are so complicated and so big. There's no one fix. There are many fixes, but it is something that we have to pay attention to.
Yeah,
we obviously have to also get our deficits under control. Don't get me wrong. Was not opposed to any aspect of the stimulus, but we were running a gigantic deficit during good times, and somehow we have to find the political will to get our budget in order, and that probably means raising some taxes and cutting some spending, and who's in favor of that, right?
No, exactly.
Well, and it goes back to we're trying to figure out, and we're learning, and we are finding out the things we don't need, and maybe we don't have to spend a lot of money on figuring out whether a shrimp should run on a treadmill or not.
Maybe that's true. You figure it out. You two figure it out, and on your next show, you can let us all in on it.
Well, I'll tell you something. Talking about the deficit is going to be a 2-hour podcast. It's going to be a long time. So let's do that some other time. But, just really quickly before we end it, getting a story about what you just talked about, one of my favorite bars I just found out today here in Las Vegas is not even going to reopen. They're done. They're closing their doors for good. And for me, I lose a drinking destination. But for this is a middle class person.
But you got 18 other
everything.
Ron, so
yeah, that's right. Exactly. So yes, it's really hitting hard. along a whole variety of people, and something has to be done about this, no question. Mark, everything that we talked about today in today's podcast, I noticed you can read your original articles on your blog, right? You have a blog out there that you keep updated,
yes,
probably better than any other attorney I know. You actually keep this thing current, and it's good stuff. So how do people get in touch with you on that blog or on your new company website, or what do you think?
The best way to reach me is through the blog. It is Crowdfund, spelled the way it sounds, crowdfundattny.com, the abbreviation for attorney, crowdfundattny.com. Or just Google me, Mark Roderick, crowdfunding lawyer, and you'll find the blog.
And you'll also be able to find on all the links that we provide on the show notes, like I mentioned earlier. So, this is really interesting stuff. And as usual now, we're all learning. I guess we give Vicki the last word, right? Isn't that the new thing?
Well, Mark, we really enjoy you being a guest on our podcast, and we wish you every good success and good luck with your new firm. And we know you're going to make it through this. We know you're going to come out smelling like a rose on the other end.
But will I be able to play the violin? That's the question, right?
Or will you be able to go to the beach, maybe?
I'm sure. As soon as the water gets warm, I'm in the ocean. Well, listen, folks, same warm wishes to you. Stay healthy and be part of the solution, which I'm sure
Absolutely.
you will.
There you go. Right back at you, Mark. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a guest on today's show. And, Vicki, thanks for co-hosting the show as well. Folks, you're out there listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. Go to that website, scroll down to that homepage. You'll see all our syndication sources. You can pick the one you like best so you never miss another episode. If you like what you heard today, send us an email, info@mappableusa.com. Let us know, or put a comment on the page that you're listening to this podcast on right now. That'd be great, too. If you want to be a guest on the show, there's a guest tab there, and we'll fill that out. We'll see what you can do about getting you on the show. And lastly, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for all your support. And we'll be at you next time with another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.